Welcome to the Maternal Archives podcast, a podcast that supports new and expecting parents by checking in with real moms on tough topics through authentic conversations. I'm your host, Ashley, and this is the Diary series, where moms share a page from their own personal story on tough topics such as solo parenting, parenting through divorce, and healing through postpartum depression. Before we get into it, I want to provide a trigger warning for today's episode because it will include details on postpartum depression and suicidal ideation. As May is Mental Health Awareness Month, this topic will be discussed in hopes of raising awareness, education, and prevention. According to the CDC, 1 in every 8 women who experience live birth will also experience symptoms of postpartum depression. The National Library of Medicine also reported that although the need for mental health resources increased in the year 2020, there was a 22% drop in all adult mental health services being offered that year. If you are a first-time mom or mom-to-be, please know that this experience is not the case in every pregnancy. Each pregnancy and postpartum experience differ, and my experience with postpartum depression was after my second birth, but I actually had the complete opposite experience with my first baby. And don't get me wrong, physically, I was exhausted after my first baby, but mentally, I was solid. Something that helped me recognize I was experiencing postpartum depression was by educating myself on the signs and symptoms prior to giving birth. Between all the What to Expect books and the 10 things you need to add to your baby registry on Mom Talk, another source that came in handy was the National Institute of Mental Health, where they actually deliver the a la carte version of the signs and symptoms for postpartum depression, such as feeling hopelessness, sad, or anxious most of the time, and also loss of or irregular sleep patterns. During the first 6 months after my second baby, my brain decided to skip the entire a la carte version and go for the sampler platter. I went from persistent doubts about my ability to care for my babies to difficulty sleeping, and yes, even when the baby fell asleep. Continuous feelings of hopelessness and the viral case of mom guilt, and of course the best-selling series of anxious thoughts. And from September of 2020 until the spring of 2021, I experienced postpartum depression that included nonstop suicidal ideation. Something I feel it's important to mention is that the love for each one of my kids was never altered throughout this process. But as I sat next to my new, adorable, perfect little human being, I couldn't help but feel like I was not enough, and like my baby deserved better. Even worse, every day after my second birth, my brain was constantly trying to convince me that the only solution to giving my babies enough of everything they needed and deserved was by taking away the one thing that wasn't enough for them, and that was me. Public and self-stigma left me stuck with hopelessness, anxiety, but my pride and comparison were burying me in shame. I couldn't get over the fact that I could not fix myself. Take 1 part postpartum depression, 1 part anxiety, mix with a global pandemic and add a splash of pride, and you have yourself a recipe for a lonely, hopeless, self-critiquing 4th trimester where the only one indulging is you. But when you're physically torn apart and made to wake up and care for 2 under 2, day and night, 1 a.m. feeding, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes all you can hear are the haunting thoughts of not enough, playing over and over in your head. Not enough sleep, not enough time, not enough support. Postpartum depression has a way of making you look in the mirror and feel like you're constantly falling short. But it wasn't me I was actually seeing. It was a version of myself I'd never seen before. A version I didn't expect after having the best experience and overwhelming joy with my first pregnancy. I kept questioning what was happening to me, and I didn't understand why. After the first few weeks of increasingly strong depression and suicidal thoughts, I decided to seek help thanks to a vulnerable but honest conversation between me and a close friend who shared their battle with depression since her teen years. Her transparency surprised me and made me wonder why I kept holding on to the fact that I was experiencing postpartum depression. Until the spring of 2021, nobody knew. But in between all our baby and mommy milestones were quiet moments with screaming thoughts to take my own life. During October 2020, I decided it was time to reach out and seek help. I made a call to my health insurance and they immediately asked me if I was having suicidal thoughts. I hesitated, but answered honestly and received an appointment right after. Knowing a medical professional was going to be available to guide me through my depression gave me the sense of hope that I really needed, and I finally started to feel like I might be able to overcome this. It was my appointment date, and I remember the phone ringing. And I looked at the phone and just thought, this is it. This is where my healing begins. I wanted so badly to feel like myself again before anyone knew what I was really battling. I answered the phone so quickly, but my hello was interrupted by a recording saying my appointment had been canceled and that I needed to call back to reschedule when the doctor was back in. From someone battling through feelings of isolation and shame and depression, I was immediately frustrated and I started to lose the small bit of hope that I thought I was beginning to see. But little did I know that canceled appointment would actually lead me to the right place and the right type of help that was meant for my specific healing journey. A few weeks later, I realized there was someone I still hadn't called, but I'm forever glad that I did. With years of experience in counseling as a family and marriage therapist, I was led to Reverend Linda Miller, a God-fearing woman who keeps it professional but does not hesitate to speak truth. After a few casual exchanges of how are you and how are the kids, we got to it. She asked me what I was hoping to discuss that day, but no matter how I tried to ease into the fact that I'd been experiencing suicidal thoughts, there's no easy way to do it. But I knew being truly transparent for the sake of healing was the only way for me. Although I still attempted to tiptoe around the fact that I was experiencing postpartum depression, at least for me, there was still something about confronting my own current mental and emotional state out loud that felt worse than my first Brazilian wax. But after a few ongoing therapy sessions with Linda, I started to see a bit of myself again. The non-postpartum version of myself. The version of me who's generally happy, enjoys coffee with friends, and loves a good karaoke night. And although my first try at finding help didn't end the way I expected it to, my hope is that anyone experiencing postpartum depression or suicidal ideation can take my experience and see that the right help is out there if you're willing to fight for yourself because you absolutely deserve it. Sometimes that first call is difficult, but thankfully, help has become so easily accessible that resources like Talkspace provide online options, or calling the number 988 or texting to 988. You can get support 24 hours a day in both English and in Spanish. Whatever the resource you choose, you are definitely worth making the effort. But before I close, I would like to just thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. And if you feel called to share today's topic with someone, please do. My hope is that every parent is able to overcome anything hindering them from experiencing true joy and love that parenthood is really meant to bring. Until next time, I'm your host, Ashley, and thank you so much for listening to Maternal Archives. Take care.